otherwise.
Okay.
I hit the live button. We are officially live.
We're live.
We are live. We are live. Good morning, all. It's a beautiful day. Today, Kiltz is day 13. Well, I got to hit the Instagram. Let me see if I get them to come on live too. So,
J-Bud says this is one of the smartest guests in the carnivore arena. Going to be a good show today. True.
All right. We are live today. Welcome, everyone. Eddie is here. Goeke?
Yes, you got it right.
Awesome. We're live on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, maybe some TikTok. I don't know. And Kiltz Mighty Tribe. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to Alia. Dr. Nelson is off today. He's traveling. We're going to Vegas. And for Chris Brandlin's meetup and talking about carnivore, I am day 13, no food, no calories. I've had a little decaf coffee. I've had a little bit of electrolyte mix with a little stevia, but nothing yesterday or today. And it is a beautiful day in paradise. And we've got Eddie Goeke on today, sharing his story about health and wellness and carnivore or ketovore or whatever. So maybe we'll start it off with, let's see, it's #KMT. What's the giveaway today?
Kiltz's Keto is Carnivore book or Living with Intent. We're going to do The Art of Living with Intent today by Dr. Rob Kiltz.
Yeah, let's get that one out there. All right.
Awesome.
And I'm gonna throw Kiltz's Keto Carnivore too. But Eddie, thank you for being here and curious about your story because many people may not have heard it. Would you mind a elevator speech? Maybe go up and down twice or something.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. Also, I'd like to say thank you for having me on. It's a great opportunity. I've known of you for a few years now, so it's quite surreal to have this experience. But anyway, yeah, I'll try and keep my story as brief as possible while maintaining all the necessary details, the important details. My story starts really whenever I was 16 years old. I started developing really odd symptoms. I was completely normal, of course, like everyone else. So I didn't really have to bat an eye at my health or what I was doing at all. You know, I took that for granted, like most of us do. And I started to develop really, really odd symptoms that involved, it was sort of congruous with pot symptoms. You had, you know, the elevated heart rate when standing specifically, but also the blood pressure swings whenever I would get up from a sitting position to a standing position. And it was to a point where anytime I was standing or walking, I was basically at a heart rate of about 130 BPM. It wouldn't go below that point. And it was really scary. I thought I had a lot of heart problems. I would get a lot of tension in my chest. And of course, whenever your blood pressure is super high, it's not going to make that fear quell itself at all. So, but I started to develop a really, really severe symptom that was extremely mysterious. No one really knew what to think of it, including myself. And that was that anytime that I would feel any emotion, whether it be positive or negative, or whether it be severe or completely subtle, I would experience extreme crippling pain, physical pain. It would cause me to keel over. I wouldn't be able to stand up. I would have to either sit down, and really optimally, I'd be lying down on my back. And I didn't really know what else I didn't know what to make of that. We went to go see multiple doctors, and mainly my general care practitioner, though, of course. And of course, as many people that may be listening to this will know, it is really easy for a doctor to sit there and just sort of perfunctorily dismiss what you have going on and say that it is anxiety or depression. Granted, to be as forgiving as possible, it kind of makes sense for him to say that, considering if someone is going to tell you something that mysterious, like that mysterious of a symptom, and says, well, whenever I feel any emotion, I feel physical pain. I mean, I guess that's one of the few reasons that's one of the few rational reasons to kind of make that a possible reason as to why you're going through something like that. But either way, I was staying home from school for basically 4 days out of the 5 that I should have been there. And it was really discouraging, but it's not like I wanted to do that. So eventually I failed to get any answers as to what was going on with me. So I decided to force myself to go to school, despite that, because I have this sort of thing in my head to a fault that if I have an excuse not to do something, even if it is a valid excuse, my brain does not allow me to sort of evade, I guess you could say, or prevent myself from working or doing something that I think I have a responsibility to do. So I have that trait in my head, but it's to a fault. So even in this situation, I had a reason to stay home, but I decided not to do it. I forced myself to go to school. It wasn't great. It wasn't a great experience. But I thought, well, at least I'm doing what I should do as a responsible citizen, even though I don't work yet, but I might as well go to school, right? And then eventually, I actually decided to go to work through a little tumultuous process with my stepdad during quarantine and all that stuff. And I got a job, and so I was going to work now because there was no in-person schooling, and all I was doing is running myself into the dirt. All my symptoms, and I had a whole list of symptoms that I could go on and on about that were like pages long that I would start writing down. But the main crippling one was the one that I just described. And I was really just running myself into the dirt still. Like all my symptoms were getting worse. And then I got another job that was supposed to be easier, but then, at that point, all the damage had been done over the course of a year. And so it didn't really do me any favors until the beginning of 2022. I was completely debilitated. I had to go on leave for work because I turned my neck one way and I completely lost vision for about half a second, which the significance of half a second is entirely relative to what reference you're referring to. Half a second when it comes to losing vision is half a second too long, way too long. And so it was terrifying. And I was like, okay, something is seriously going wrong, really going wrong. So I was intently researching even before this, but I had more time than ever at this point to really research what was going on with me. And it took until, I believe, the beginning of February to actually discover my condition in full. At least I had the confidence that I had discovered it, which was a condition called craniocervical instability, also known as CCI, abbreviated as such. And really, it's characterized by an instability or a laxity of the ligaments, which will hold bone to bone in your body, of the cervical spine, so up in your neck, leading up to the cranium, so leading up right to the back of your head, basically. And I remember looking at all the symptoms that involved and thinking, oh, wow, I have a bunch of cracking and popping all over my body that I never even really, I completely ignored that because of all the other severe symptoms that I had. I didn't even realize that. I was like, oh, cracking and popping, that's normal. Everyone has that. But I didn't realize how systemic it was, not just in my neck, it was actually everywhere. But I was like, oh, wow, and the nerve pain and the sort of pulsing in my head, depending on the position of my neck, which is a sign that the ligaments, the bones are moving around too much and are impinging on the surrounding areas of the body, depending on, what area you're referring to. So in this case, the spine, the cervical spine. And I went, oh, this is really interesting. Well, I discovered it from a clinic that is based in Florida that actually treats this condition regeneratively. And so I started watching all of their seminars because they had multiple seminars. The main doctor there, Dr. Ross Hauser, who treats the condition, he's like the pioneer of this clinic. He had multiple seminars on CCI. He had a seminar called vagopathy, I believe. So the degeneration of the vagus nerves that are, that stem from your brain stem and can be impacted by cervical spine instability. And I was just binging those videos because I was like, oh, I'm certain that this is what I have. Well, lo and behold, we actually get there in April of 2022. So April 6th, I believe. And then on April 8th, I had my diagnostic appointment with them. I had actually scheduled an appointment with them. And they did all of their fancy testing that I'd never seen before. That's the beauty of having a private clinic and having them do a bunch of tests that I've never seen, but, had faith in, because I was like, oh, anything different is probably better, because all I had had since then was all the same stuff, and it would all come back as normal, right? And I remember Dr. Hauser came in, and it was kind of a surreal moment because I had just been looking at him like he was a celebrity for so long, watching him on YouTube or something. So meeting him in person was interesting. But I remember him going through my scans, and then at the very end of it, he said, Eddie, if you'd come any later, you were on your way for something catastrophic, which, I was 18 years old at the time. And despite my age, I feel like everyone knows what that means in doctor language, right? So it was, in a way, actually in the main way, it was primarily relieving. It wasn't daunting at all. It's something that I was actually waiting for. I was waiting for any answer. Years I've been dealing with this at this point, because I started in 2019 dealing with symptoms. And then 2022, was when I finally got an answer. And so we immediately started up these regenerative treatments. And ever since then, I've been getting these treatments. Now, how does this tie in to carnivore, right? That's kind of the question here. Well, right before I had to go on leave for work, I actually started really thinking. I was like, nothing is working. I've been going to all these clinics, all these doctors' offices. They're not telling me anything of any utility. They're not giving me any answers, even approximations to an answer. They're not giving me any of those. In fact, the only thing that I ever got was from a neurologist to talk about my nerve pain and nerve tingling that I was having, and muscle twitching. Where they said that, oh, you have some slight neuropathy in your left elbow, and you just need to gain some weight for it because the fat will insulate the neural tissue, and that's what the main problem is. You're too skinny, basically. I was thinking, well, that's not right. That cannot be right. And so I thought, well, at some point I have to take matters into my own hands. But since I grew up as a Zoomer, as they call them, I don't know. I wasn't given any information about how to take matters into my own hands with respect to solving health problems. We're all just taught like, oh, like eat this if you want to be healthy, but it's optional kind of thing. It's implicitly like it's an implicit messaging thing that's ingrained in our brains. Like, okay, yeah, I should probably eat this way if I want to feel the absolute best, but it's completely optional. And if I'm not really gaining any weight and getting super fat, then I'm probably fine doing what I'm doing, and whatever, I'll get away with it. Well, eventually I started to question that. I was like, well, that doesn't make complete sense. I mean, maybe this is what not feeling my best with respect to how diet's supposed to make me feel. Maybe that's what this is all from. And so I started to think, I was like, okay, well, let me start changing things. And I didn't really have a great way of going about that, because I was never taught that way. It was just eat a bunch of plants and a balanced diet, right? So I started doing that. And I didn't feel any better. I was having bowls full of, I'd have like a Knorr pasta side as a base, but I'd put everything in there. I put like every type of bean that you can think of, every vegetable, broccoli, green beans, peas, everything in there. And I was eating the whole bowl, and I was like, and I actually I grew accustomed to it. I was like, oh, I like the taste of this. But it never made me feel better at all. Not even close. If anything, it probably made me feel worse, but I just didn't know the reason why. And then I started to I started to transgress because it was really discouraging. Okay, well, this isn't working, so let me see, and let me just go back to what I was doing. Well, I became really conscientious of my symptoms, really conscientious. So I went into the pantry and I decided to eat a lot of grain-based snacks one night, just because I was bored, frankly. I didn't have to worry about weight at the time. I was criticized as being too skinny. So, I was just going into the pantry and eating whatever I wanted to eat. And I remember thinking, oh, I wonder how this is going to make me feel. I wonder if this is going to flare my symptoms. And lo and behold, right after, and I mean, by right after, I mean within 60 seconds of having finished all of that food, I had all of my muscle twitching that I had systemically throughout my body. That was a primary symptom of mine. All of it started acting up. It was like I was vibrating. And I was like, wow, okay. I mean, association doesn't equal causation necessarily, as we know, but that's quite interesting. And it's the only thing that really flared it up as much as anything else did. And so I actually became ecstatic. Again, goes back to the theme of feeling relieved instead of having this daunting feeling, because I'm finally approximating an answer, at least ostensibly. So I go and look up, are grains bad for you? I was like, that's the common denominator, right? Which, at least it's something, but there's plenty there as well. There are also other common denominators, but I remember looking that up and thinking, this is so silly. Why am I even looking this up? And the first article that pops up is Why Grains Are Killing You by CrossFit Impulse, actually. just a site that I'm not familiar with it at all, but I remember vividly what site it was. I was like, whoa, okay. So I start reading it, and that's when I started learning about lectins and phytates. Those are the first two things that I actually learned about. And but I didn't know what they were. I just knew terms. I was like, oh, it's these things in plants that like, or it's these things in grains. I didn't even think plants in general. I just thought it's these things in grains that are like flaring me up. And I remember getting like so excited. I was like, oh, I'm going to cut out grains. And that never fixed the issue. It made me feel better. Not least because I was cutting out grains, probably because I was cutting out many other things that are associated with those foods as well. But still, it was like I was like 5% there, 5% better, 10%. And I was like, that's not enough. So then I'm thinking, why do I not feel great? I thought this was like the answer, right? And so then I start looking up, well, what else has lectins and phytates in it? And then I came across someone by the name of Dr. Stephen Gundry, which many in the space know of. They've at least heard of him. And he's fixated on the lectins in all plants. And so I started learning about, the lectins in all plants across the board. So then I decided to go what's called lectin-free. After having, by the way, gone Whole30 as well before this, thinking, oh, I've heard this before as well, so let's try that, which I also felt better on. But then I went lectin-free, and I felt even better on that. So it was like 30% better, maybe. But it still wasn't great. And that's whenever everything, went downhill for me with respect to, my cervical and my structural condition. But that's what brings us back to the current point. Even whenever I was undergoing treatments, I still was fixated on diet. I was fixated on learning everything surrounding diet, like everything. I needed to fix myself with diet. It was the only thing that was really in my control besides these treatments, these regenerative treatments. And later on, I realized the increased importance of that because I realized that I didn't just have instability in my cervical spine. I actually had hypermobile EDS. So it was actually all across my body. And I was an extremely severe case of that. And so I was like, wow, this would explain everything. The muscle twitching. In fact, the emotional pain, that was because my ribs were too unstable. So anytime I would feel anything in my stomach, right, it would cause like extreme pain because the ribs would be moving around too much. So it was affecting my solar plexus. So I was just scrolling on Instagram, those micro learning kind of things, like all these health posts. So it wasn't doom scrolling. It was me replacing all that mindless entertainment with a bunch of, I guess, at the time, more sophisticated mindless entertainment. And we'll get to that because at the end of the day, I wasn't really getting any answers, and it was sort of pseudoscientific. But despite that, it was still a step in the right direction, me taking responsibility for my health. And so I started coming across a creator by the name of Paul Saladino, who many people in the space are aware of. Now, at the time, I used to follow him because I was a staunch Gundry follower, and I thought, wow, if given what Dr. Gundry says, if it's all correct, and of course I believed it like it was the gospel, I thought, well, if I wanted a diet to like send me to the grave the fastest, I would choose Paul's diet because he's got all the fruit and honey, that's the sugar and all that stuff, and then also the red meat, because red meat's horrible for you, right? Right? Or red meat, you can't have too much of that. So I thought, like, if you wanted to manufacture the most anti-longevity diet, according to Dr. Gundry's principles, I was like, oh, that would be Paul's diet. So I actually initially followed him for entertainment purposes. I'm not kidding. But then, despite that, I still, even though I followed him for entertainment purposes, I was listening to what he was saying still. And I would watch the whole video. I'd be like, okay. And eventually I was like, you know what? He's kind of got some points in there. He's got some points. And so I started to transgress away from the Dr. Gundry approach to the animal-based, quote-unquote, approach. And in fact, in June of 2022, I decided to just go full on that for 1 month. Initially, I thought, okay, this is just what I'm going to do, but it happened to be only 1 month. And the reason for that was because it was, and this is just me objectively speaking, and I'm not drawing any causal relationships here because there are many things going on. However, it was the only time that I had extreme blood pressure increases and heat flashes and sweats and increased heart rate after I ate a meal, was whenever I was eating meals on that diet. And I continued to convince myself, I was like, it cannot be that. Like, every step that I take, it's a better approximation towards the best diet for me. So this can't be right. This can't be right. Well, eventually, I had to come to terms with the fact that no, it's not right. And in fact, even whenever I was eating all the fruit and honey that I was eating, every bite that I would take, I was thinking, this cannot be right. This doesn't make any sense. That I can eat this much sugar from fruit and honey, and that's totally appropriate. Like, that's what I'm designed to do. It just didn't make sense. But I still did it because I was like, well, you know, it's the best. I think this is the best information I'm getting so far. Well, eventually I came to terms with the fact that that wasn't, because I came across a creator by the name of Bart K, who made a video on Paul Saladino, and sort of over time, I started to be convinced of, you know, the overall pure carnivore approach. And so eventually I decided to just transition to that. And now that was the best that I had ever felt on any diet, just hands down, because I was really skeptical. I mean, every step that I took, I was skeptical of everything that I did. So it's not like I just went into it and was going to be like, oh, this is the right thing. So now I'm going to continue to try and convince myself desperately that this is the right decision. That was never what I was doing. In fact, it was the opposite. I was tearing down. I was constantly in doubt because of how many times I had been jaded against other approaches that didn't really work for me, or perhaps even made me worse. So, but I felt the best that I'd ever felt. I was eating grass-fed steaks, grass-fed ground beef, pastured eggs, grass-fed butter, and really no carbohydrates to speak of while I was undergoing treatment.
No plants. No plants?
None. Yeah. So no plants whatsoever. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, oh man, this has to be the way then. I'm not experiencing any symptoms. But of course I was like, okay, you know what? Let's wait a few months. Things can happen in a few months. Maybe I'm just not, maybe things will catch up to me. Well, no, in fact, actually I lost, even as someone as skinny as I was, which just for reference, especially at the time, like specifically for the time, I was 5'11", and I was 145 pounds, I think. So I was pretty skinny, and I've always been like that through my whole life. But I actually lost 10 pounds, thinking, I thought that was actually a bad thing. I was like, oh, if anything, I'm losing too much weight. And I went down to 135. But I was just stuffing myself with food that I'd never, like, the amount of food that I was eating was more than I'd ever eaten before. And I was thinking, wow, I mean, I guess what they say in the carnivore space is right about that. You know, of course, it depends on the person. It depends on your individual phenotypical context and all that. But fine, okay. Still, it was still working in the way that they said it was supposed to for me, despite the fact that weight loss was not even, that wasn't a concern for me, but it was happening. But I was feeling way better. And I actually did that for a year and a half. And then I started to, you know, hedge my luck a little bit. I started to test my luck, and I took it for granted, and I transgressed during, I think, a Christmas of the next year, and then I decided to go right back to what I was doing before. I was introducing I was going from home to Florida. I was staying in Florida. In Florida, I had higher quality food. At home, I was eating more grain fed versions of the food, but it still didn't really flare me up at all. The grain fed was fine for me, but I was dead set on this way. But I thought to myself, you know, whenever I discovered Bart, I realized that there was a different perspective that you could bring to the space. I didn't realize that there was like a biochemistry element that should be studied. I was always fixated on like the health science, because that's the science that pertains to health. That's the only thing. Those are the only inferences that you can draw from, is from that space. And so I started realizing, you know, I heard Bart talking about physiology and biochemistry. And given the fact that this approach works so well, I thought, well, that's the reason why. It's because he's inferring from other things. And I've always been a sort of erudite thinker. I've been a very analytical thinker. In school, I was just whenever I actually paid attention and was interested in something, I was great at it. Specifically mathematics. That's kind of how I think. I'm like an abstract thinker. But I thought, you know, I could probably apply that to this. Like I actually developed a passion for this because of how much it affected me. And so I thought, okay, I want to learn this stuff. Like I want to learn deeply what's going on. At first, it started with less deep stuff. It was more so, oh, I actually would write research papers though, despite this, because I had nothing else to do. And it was on things like vitamin C. I was like, oh, I'm getting very little vitamin C. It's true. You get very little vitamin C on a carnivore diet. But despite that, I have no symptoms. Well, maybe it depends on what you're doing. But maybe. Yeah, but if in the case of ruminant meat, muscle meat specifically, you're getting vitamin C. You're still getting vitamin C. But I'm getting, compared to what people normally get, you're getting vastly lower of an amount. But despite that, I'm not developing any symptoms. So I'd write a whole paper on this. And then I was writing papers on like cholesterol, saturated fat, and heart disease, and all like the truth behind it and all that stuff. And then I was writing papers on fiber and all this other stuff. You could say. But
no. I do say,
yeah.
what if that's the simple story? We're poisoned by plants.
Yeah. No,
nothing more.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's a big culprit, if not the primary one, because what I mean, people oftentimes they cast aspersions at carbohydrates, but where do carbohydrates primarily come from?
Well, carbohydrates are in meat.
Yeah.
Carbohydrates are in plants.
Yeah. The amount.
Well, what percentage of science is snake oil?
Oh boy.
You ever wonder?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the vast majority. Especially, it also depends on the field that you're referring to. Mainly human nutrition science. Yeah, that's a big problem.
Well, maybe again. I want to throw this out, Eddie, because your story is remarkable. Number one is we label infinite diseases caused by the same problem. So, the cause of your problem was CCI.
Yep.
Which is a complicated story about a simple cause, because we still don't get back to the cause when we make these diagnoses.
Well, we don't really know what the cause was, because I'm still not fixed.
Well, the cause is you've been poisoned by plants. 22 years old?
I'm 21. Yeah. For
21 years.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree that could be a very possible culprit, because frankly,
EDS is a inflammatory condition. I always say it's such a simple story. It's caused by plant protein, low-fat diet. And plants are remarkably poisonous to animals, especially humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so Occam's razor, what does it mean?
Well, yeah. No, I mean that is a common denominator. But I think there could be multiple causes to a condition that complicated. I mean, it could very well be characterized primarily by inflammation, but is the inflammation being caused by the EDS, or is the EDS being caused by the inflammation? Or there's a negative feedback loop.
EDS is a doctor, a modern medical system's labeling of certain symptoms that enable us to check a box. But what I'm suggesting is there's a simplicity to all of it, that you're a smart guy. I'm a math guy. I could do math like crazy. I couldn't read, but math was my science. And what I've learned about science, because I've been in it for a long time, and I was just listening to a video by Strong Medicine, and I've written papers and published, and the majority of science is based on prestige, publication, and good old boy stuff. Mm-hmm. And even though I know our smartness in all of this, but did you get better on a mostly animal-based diet?
I got better with respect to inflammatory symptoms. Yes.
Well, I mean, because it's all just inflammation. Like, you're a Ferrari.
Yeah, but I want to clarify that without the regenerative treatments, even with dietary intervention,
I'm not denying. Okay, look, I do regenerative treatments. I'm not denying our ability to do these things. That's important, okay? Because I do them. I think there are regenerative stem cell things that we do, and other things. Yeah. I guess what I'm working for all of us, and by the way, we doctors are inappropriately taught. You were inappropriately taught. We're all inappropriately taught propaganda. We go into medicine in order to help people heal, but the system we're taught in gives us the wrong information potentially. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I've really pondered as to what could be what was the cause of my condition? Was it purely sort of a genotypical consequence of my innate genotype, or was it because of phenotypical adaptations that occurred because of my diet or because of any other lifestyles? Because, I mean, you talk about an inappropriate diet poisoned by plants, as you say on the screen right there. But I feel like there's also other things that could have prevented the issue that we as a
Well,
collective generation or multiple generations could also have been doing that are wrong and not and consistent to what our genes are most evolved to withstand. I think that's a big
Occam's
problem.
razor, simplicity, is what I've learned in life. We eat a lean meat, low fat, cooked meat diet, which is deadly for humans. And the majority of food we ship around and feed our brothers and sisters is a plant-based. And plants contain poisons that beef does not. The glycobiome, what do you know about the glycobiome?
Well, it's a vast topic. It's mainly to do with how much the exterior of your cells consists of glucose. It's the way that glucose is sort of integrated in your cells. Yeah.
Well, there are 9 sugars in the human glycans, and they're not just on the outside of the cell. They're critical, and they're everywhere. And each organism has their own barcode of glycans, and that's probably one of the biggest problems. No matter what you eat, drink, breathe, or put in and on your body, there's a glycan of that organism that is opposite or different than ours, and that's our main reason why we have allergic immunologic reactions. And so we in medicine have created these names and labels of every disease as if they're caused by different things. They're not. They're caused by the same problems. That's the thing I've learned more than anything, is that your car might lose its brakes, its electrical, its tires, its engine, its paint, or even the internal seats become oxidative and damage over time. Our body has those same problems. We think because they're different diagnoses, it's a different cause. And I argue it's the same cause, just different things are breaking down.
Right. Well, yeah. So I mean, I think you and I are basically on the same page. You're saying that Occam's razor, basically the most simple conclusion that can be observed is most likely the most true one, and you don't need to really sort of zoom into a tree or multiple trees to actually figure out the problem, but you should look at the forest overall, kind of thing. Like, look at what's going on, take a broad view and look at what is the most simple thing, what is the most common denominator here, and that's probably the reason why people are sick. I understand what you're saying. I mean, if that's correct, and if that's a correct interpretation of what you're saying.
Right. Like, let's just take vitamins for a minute. Okay. Our discovery of vitamins. Our discovery of cholesterol and statins. Okay. We're assuming it's all correct, because that's kind of our agreement. We agree that certain science is right, and so that's how we formulate a lot of our theories in this, even in the carnivore keto world. But what if many of them are wrong? And so I have a low vitamin D.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think you're referring to reference ranges now. Yeah.
Rickets. I have no disease of vitamin D. Okay. So my sense is the same for most everything. I've not seen deficiencies in any disease. What I see is inflammation as the cause. And for 99% of things I've learned in practicing medicine for a long time, removing the plants and adding fat seems to be one of the biggest benefits for humanity. And that's kind of the thing that I've found, despite the fact that I'm a complicated scientist too.
Mhm.
So I wrote something down. You said something about they didn't teach me this. Well, we're teaching all of us wrong anyway.
Hmm.
And
They taught themselves wrong, or they were taught wrong. It's just a chain of command. They don't know what's
we're
right.
all, but it's up to each and every one of us to question everything. And that sounds like what you're doing is digging deeper and questioning everything.
Yes. Yeah. Can I, by the way, you mentioned inflammation as sort of this, like, it's the primary common denominator. And in fact, you said it was a cause of most diseases. I would like to get your opinions on this, because what I would say is we know that inflammation is sort of a pre-programmed response that occurs in the body when it has perceived, if you're going to anthropomorphize the body a bit, damage to tissues or a potential invading pathogen. And so inflammation, I feel like, is a symptom overall that can lead to a negative feedback loop and be a subsequent cause of other things. But I think it's primarily, originally, first, it is a symptom of you doing something that is damaging to the body. I think that's probably the reason why it's the common
inflammation is
denominator.
required for reproduction. Inflammation is a process that breaks down, rebuilds, moves, not only reacts to foreign, but when we use the term inflammation, we talk about heat, redness, swelling, pain, damage, dysfunction, and death to organelles, cells, organs, and the organism. So a sperm must have the proper glycans to meet an egg. It then must release the certain chemicals that break down the cellular membrane in order to fertilize. That's inflammation, the general term we use. All right. So think of it's a term. It's part of autophagy. It's part of rebuilding. It's part of everything. So we use it as a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. Because no matter what you do in life, you're always going to bring into the human body antigenic particles that are foreign, that are going to elicit an inflammatory reaction. When you eat food, all food has some inflammatory reaction.
Yes.
But the whole intent here, because the way we live, 3 to 6 plant-based low animal fat meals a day, your body is always, the day you're born, the day you die, at immense heightened reaction of an inflammatory response.
Right. It's what's considered colloquially the chronic and systemic inflammation. Yes, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I've never said that inflammation is a bad thing. I think that what I'm saying is that if you have heightened inflammation that's chronic, you're doing something that is sort of incongruous with what your genes have most genotypically evolved to withstand over the course of thousands, tens of thousands of years. I think that's really the root cause of disease. Is something that we're not designed to, first of all, withstand to a genotypic degree because of what we've been doing ancestrally for a long time.
Well,
that's really my
genes change.
Yes.
Are the glycocalyx changes. The majority of the expression of everything we are is glycocalyx related, not our DNA protein messaging. So the environment actually tweaks our external expression.
Right. You're talking about phenotype here instead of genotype. Right.
Right. And this is, you're right. And so ultimately we're a land animal that is mostly supposed to eat raw fatty meat, and we're not. And all the diseases that are making us billions and trillions of dollars and causing the suffering of humanity and bankruptcy to so many people in America due to our incorrect advice as doctors and nutritionists and scientists and propagandists, because profits become more important than people. So all of us, I own IVF centers, okay? And so we generally, the whole idea of even the CCI treatment or CCD, I can't remember, is gained to fix the symptoms, but not treat the cause. All of us, even stem cells, are to treat the symptoms, not
Right,
the
because
cause.
right, I understand.
No disrespect to any of us, what we're doing, by the way. Don't take that. But we all open up medical practices, all of us, because I do stem cell treatment also, in order to treat the symptom, but not really getting back to understanding the foundation of we're a hunter, not a grazer, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I understand, because I don't think that I would ever have to undergo these treatments if I had not lived the way that I lived for, 16 years, 18 years, really. No, I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that the problem is, and you haven't said this, I think the problem is if someone were to say that this treatment or this condition of mine could be fully cured with proper dietary intervention, because I did that and I've done that for years now and I'm not fixed. In fact, if anything,
Okay, wait. All right. So I will say it. I've seen it, because it takes time to heal. But remember, the rest of the environment you're in, the first most important mindset, the mind is the master over everything. And as you think, so shall thee be. When you understand the power of the mind, that is number one. I've seen it.
okay.
And number two is our environment. We live in boxes, and there are many other aspects of the box of other, and including our clothing and things we put on and in and things like that, that could be factors. But I never negate the possibility of healing, even just with the power of the mind. And that's other aspect that you may or may not have tapped into yet. And I don't know if you've ever read James Allen's work, or this guy Jesus Christ's work.
This guy.
I'm a scientist, but I will tell you that the science of the mind, because you mentioned something about the doctors dismissing is a physical cause, it must be an emotional cause.
Yeah.
Can thinking elicit physiologic biochemical reactions?
Well, yes, we obviously know that. Yeah.
Right. So I agree with you one infinite. What I'm saying here is that ye of little faith, the possibilities of healing through the mind is truly the number one master of all things. And it is science. And that's the one thing I've learned. But I do agree, a 60-year-old having a baby naturally, it may happen one day, but I can help you faster using donor eggs.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And the same thing with stem cell treatment. There's value to these things. Big time.
Oh, you cut out. You said same thing with stem cell treatment, and then that was my fault. That's not your guys' fault. I have a VPN.
Value. What I said is like there's value to other things. One of the biggest problems in this world is modern medicine is expensive. And so far, stem cells aren't paid by insurance, are they?
No, this clinic has the ability to be paid by insurance. You have to do it yourself, like through independent.
Right. No, but your insurance will not pay for the stem cells themselves.
Yeah, no.
Right. So we do the same thing. Here, I'll give you this. You could go see if you can get money from your insurance. But in fact, so our biggest problem in America is the cost of healthcare. And so what we're saying here is, what if there's a cause that we can line up And I will stick to the simplicity of the story. Poisoned by plants. The challenge is your damage may be so far gone, we may or may not be able to heal you without some other things potentially.
Right.
Or it's not, or you know what? Faith in God first, the ability to believe in things unseen. 2 is fatty raw meat. Look at Sophia Clemens in Hungary, and look at the deuterium depletion by Laszlo Boros and stuff. And these are additional things that I think are really valuable that you bring. By the way, your story is amazing. At your age, by the way, or younger, I had migraines, bowel bleeding, bowel problems, incorrigible, kicked out of school in a gang, couldn't read, father in jail. I'd go to the doctor with terrible migraines and bowel problems. They did every test. Don't know. And ultimately, it took me 55 years to figure it out. And my job is to say, hey, listen, I've seen people get no eggs on IVF, 45, AMH of 0.2, very low, 0.02, by the way, and then get pregnant on carnivore diet. And so I always throw out here one of the most important things. I don't know if, oh my God, I'm trying to, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Look at Jack Canfield and so many people out there that have shared the power of the mindset. And the mission is mind first. And that's the one little dial I want to throw into this every day. But is fatty raw meat the best for us?
I would have a little bit of a bone to pick with the idea that it must be raw for it to be best. I'd love to get into that conversation.
No, it must be raw. It actually must be raw.
It must be raw.
Of course, look at for the first 3.5 million years. Did you wait for the cook to make your meal, or did you eat it raw before the next animal came and took it?
Well, we ate it raw, which is ostensibly why we have such an acidic pH, even more so than other hypercarnivores, actually, because we're also eating rotten meat.
I don't know that that's why we have acidic pH.
That's why I said ostensibly, yeah, because we don't know.
Right. But ultimately, when you cook anything, you change its structure, you damage it, you damage its molecular structure.
And you denature some things, yeah.
You're right. So now, have you ever done raw fatty meat as your only meal of any?
No. I haven't done it. No, I haven't done it personally. Yeah. And so I'm not speaking from experience.
So look at it. If you look at Pottinger's cats.
Yeah.
Pottinger's cats.
No, I know this. I know this very well. Yes.
And so I questioned it too. You know what I did? I did it. Right. And I did it because I question everything. Could it be as simple as the fact that if I set fire to my home, but it didn't break down, would it work as well when I try to live in it? Of course not.
Okay. Yes. I see what you're saying.
And so, look, we're highly biased in the stories and science we've been taught. That's our biggest issue. We must break.
Yeah. Right. No. And by we, I'm assuming you mean, people like who I was before I ever started questioning. Yeah. Well, yes. To some extent, I understand.
I'm not labeling you or I or anyone in particular. I'm just saying
because I want to say that the reason, because it seems like your implication is that I still have some ties to that sort of way of thinking. And that's why I have my current position. I'm not arguing. I want to have a conversation because that's
100%. I am not. That's why we're here, because all we did is this because we want to throw out some ideas that are radical. I mean, I've been 13 days no food.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Amazing. Yeah. I feel amazing. I'm doing water. primarily. I did a little bit of electrolytes, and I did a little bit of decaf coffee. All right. So how is it I'm fine for 13 to 15 days?
Right. It's because
You're supposed to have, you got to fuel the metabolism. You ever heard that one? Feed the metabolism.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Well, I mean, you are feeding it right now, technically. Still, because you're recycling.
You always do.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's why it's silly to say that you have to fuel it with exogenous inputs all the time, every 3 hours. So we're on agreement. Yeah, you're fueling it right now. So they always say, yeah,
always. Yeah. So what animal wants to be skinny?
Well, I mean, they don't really.
Only
they don't really
one
want
dumb
that.
animal. Only one animal.
Yeah, they don't exactly want that. They just are skinny or they're not, depending on what they do in the wild. So
no, humans want to be skinny, but no other animal. Animals fight for food to get fat.
Yeah, exactly. That's the natural proclivity. Right? Yes.
Right. So without fat, anorexics, bulimics, cachectics, sarcopenics, do they last long?
No.
They do not.
Which is also why people need to understand that just losing weight, you need to know what the weight is made up of and the methods in which you do so, because the weight shouldn't be the primary goal of your diet. The weight, it's the overall indication level of what you're actually putting into your body, because then things will fall into line. That's basically what you're saying.
Well, again, polar bears get fat on fat. So do bears. Fat is the only fuel for the body. Sugar is not. Sugars are glycosylating agents, and 99% of people know nothing about the glycobiome. Everyone thinks the microbes in your gut are good for you, but they want to kill you. They're deadly. And fat is the most important cell of your body, adipose tissue.
Yes. Yeah.
And adipocytes contain every mineral, vitamin, and building block of your body. Because if you hibernate for 6 months, like a bear, they lose no muscle mass or bone mass.
Right. Yeah. I've always said that the irony is not lost when people want to pretend like, glucose is your primary source of fuel, or at least should be, whenever the main form of mass for later use that is stored on the body is in the form of fat, not glucose. You store glycogen in your muscles and liver, but the primary storage of later energy for use is in the form of fat.
Well,
you have adipocytes for a reason. You don't have sugar cells like to store sugar.
Well, have you ever measured glycogen levels in a body?
I haven't personally, of course. I'm not a scientist, but I'm sure there's not 10 to 20.
It's not done. It's a scientific a bench study, and then the question is, have you ever seen someone depleted of glycogen?
Well, that's not. You can't have 0%, like all the way depletion of glycogen, or else your muscle fibers will not fire. So that's not even.
Well,
possible.
The question is, what is glycogen for?
It is for the conversion of glycogen. It's for breakdown in muscle cells or in liver cells, but specifically for muscle cells to fire even at low intensities by causing the myofilaments, the actin and myosin chains, to join together and constrict a muscle fiber. That's what it's for. You require glycogen for a muscle fiber to twitch.
At what level is it?
Oh, it's at very small. It depends on the severity. It depends on the significance of the muscle fiber twitch. At low intensities, it's a lot lower. At high intensities, you need a lot more.
Is it for ATP production or is it for glycosylation?
No, it's for ATP production. You break down glycogen and you produce lots of ATP, more than you can actually derive from the mitochondria through oxidative phosphorylation, in order to hydrolyze it at the myofilaments.
Well, let me ask you something. Is there fatty acids in the form of acetyl-CoA everywhere? Yes.
Yes, there is. Yes.
Right. So the pathway for glycogen to go to pyruvate is a multi-step process.
Yes.
But the process to go from a fatty acid to acetyl-CoA is so short and fast. So
yeah, but it's not oxidative phosphorylation doesn't produce the ATP at a fast enough rate to cause the muscle fiber to twitch at the intensity that it needs to, or the speed that it needs.
The Krebs cycle takes acetyl-CoA
yes,
and makes ATP.
Yes.
My point here is simple. Every cytoplasm, every cell contains a significant amount of fatty acids.
Yes.
And ketones. Why would you say glycogen, give me glucose, to go through 5 pathways to make faster ATP?
Because the rate at which glucose can be used to create ATP is within, and specifically through glycogenolysis, actually, is between 10 to 40 milliseconds.
I disagree.
It's faster than anything else.
Disagree. I'll
well,
tell
then
you
what? Here, okay.
Well, no. This is good. No, Eddie, please. Look, here's the question.
I'm engaged.
Look. I thought that so, but what I believe is it. I disagree. I love Bart. I'm just throwing out my disagreement. I'll tell you why.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'll let you talk.
I know your story because I've heard it immensely. But what I'm saying is, if I may, that glycosylation, it's one of the most important post-translational modifications of every cell. In order to create a neurotransmitter, they're mostly post-translationally modified with a sugar. And I'm suggesting that the sugar glycosylation is much more important at the neurofiber junction. And that's the part we don't talk about, because we talk about ATP and energy as if it's the rate limiting factor, but it's not. It's oxygen and neurotransmitters. Just throwing out an idea here. I just think that's incorrect. I know that's the story, by the way.
Okay. Why do you think that, I want to get your opinion on why you think that muscle fibers, even at low intensities, as observed in human beings, require glycogen for muscle fiber twitch then? They use it all the time.
Neurotransmitters.
That's why?
Glycosylation is critical for neurotransmitter production. And without the neurotransmitter, I'll give you curare or I'll give you cyanide and I could stop that fast.
Well, I mean, okay.
Yeah. So the point a little bit is again, all I'm asking a scientist to do for a moment is step back and say maybe, because hepatogenous diabetes, have you heard of it?
Hepatogenous diabetes?
Yes.
No, I've not heard of that term before. No.
It's fascinating. Look, I didn't believe this. I love my good friend Bart K. I agree with in many ways. Glucose is not a direct energy source. It must be converted in the liver via insulin to fat, or it cannot be energy.
Well,
and you can see.
Okay.
I'm just giving you my 2 cents, because a type 1 diabetic is missing what?
Well, they're missing insulin.
That's
they're
correct.
Not secreting sufficient insulin. Yeah.
Okay, so they have. Let's just say they have none. Are they fat or skinny upon their death?
Well, they're skinny.
Why?
Because insulin is the primary prototypical anabolic hormone that's involved in fatty acid synthesis, but also the utilization of glucose in other cells through GLUT4.
Maybe not.
Also, it increases the maximum velocity of triglyceride synthesis, which is actually the fat that's used to be stored.
Right. But my insulin is less than 1.
Right.
And so now a hepatogenous cirrhotic patient, interesting, a cirrhotic patient. Thank you everyone for allowing Eddie and I have this conversation, by the way. I love this guy. If you have liver failure, are you fat or skinny?
Well, you're skinny.
What are you missing? You're cachectic and sarcopenic. You have no fat. But your insulin and glucose levels are very high.
Okay. Well, yeah, but the liver is involved. It's like the catalyst for the creation of fat in the first place, though. So if you have,
it is the only place. It is the only place you make fat, and it's the only place that insulin's job is to make fat. That's a little my point. You cannot.
Well, and so, also fat cells. Yeah.
Directly at the sites. Yeah. Are critical metabolic sites. But my point a little bit is, and you probably have questions. We have a few more minutes. almost. And this is plants are the poison, sugars are glycosylating agents primarily, and fat is the only fuel for the mitochondria. Those are my three premises.
Well, what about pyruvate?
What's that?
What about pyruvate? I'm not saying you should be oxidizing lots of pyruvate, but pyruvate's a fuel, and also ketones. But
No.
I'll get to that because ketones are from fat, right? But
pyruvate must be converted to acetyl-CoA, or it cannot be your energy. Point here is that we eat food broken down into these substances. The only fuel for your body is fat, and sugars must be converted to fat in the liver or you die. And that's the simplicity. Insulin is a digestive hormone. And although we think it has multiple purposes, I question the majority of the science personally. So,
okay.
And because all this stuff on the Krebs cycle and all these cycles, which are very interesting, again, are confusing to the general. How should you eat food? How's your body really work? So that we simplify it for most of us idiots. Me.
Are you actually? Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were actually asking me that question.
No.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm a nutritional biochemistry major in undergrad, did research in it, and I can now look back at it, and because 99.9% of people for health and wellness need simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
Our complicated stories just garble it all up, in my opinion. That's good. So, but look, I'm just throwing out a different theory idea that what if glycogen is a glycosylating agent that's critical for neurotransmitter production, because you can't move your muscles without what first? Oxygen, ATP, neurotransmitters.
Okay.
And the neurotransmitters are probably more damaged than we know. That's part of the reason for MS, ALS, heart dysfunction, and all of it.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Answer some questions.
Yeah, I was going to say it's late, so I want to make sure that people get their questions in, so I'm letting them say things.
Couple questions.
Okay, first I just want Cool wants thing. Eddie, thank you for your super chat. Eddie has 500 years of carnivore experience. He only looks young because he doesn't age.
I would say
thanks.
Infinite. J Bud, Eddie, can you explain to everybody in the Kiltz Mighty tribe why they should stop using the word calories and stop counting them if they still do?
Okay, the most simple explanation that I can give is that we are an open system and not a closed system. And I'll give you the reason why that matters. First of all, we have to describe what the differences are. A closed system, also known as a bomb calorimeter, really, is a system that allows for the flow of energy into it, but and the flow of energy out of it, but not mass. So open systems allow for both in and out. So we as human beings, we're open systems, which means that we allow for the flow of energy into the system. For example, you can absorb photons of light and they can have an effect on your physiology, your metabolic rate. And you also release calories, which creates body heat. So that's energy in and energy out. You also have an open system, or you also have the ability in an open system to allow for the flow of mass in and out. So we urinate, for example, we excrete urine. We also intake food, which is in the form of mass. So the reason why that matters is because if you look at a food label and you look at the calorie number that is not calculated, but estimated, plus or minus 20% in either direction, but let's just say that it weren't. Let's just say it was a 100% accurate number. If you were to consume that food, you're not going to have calories that you're consuming. The amount that you actually absorb of that food, it's not going to be a direct translation to what the caloric value is calculated necessarily, because that depends on how much you absorb, which also depends on how many hormones that you're actually, what your hormonal activity is. So you have no idea how much of that food you're going to excrete in many different forms, many different possible routes. And you also don't know how much of it you're going to absorb. You also, after absorbing it, don't know how much of it is going to be used to create a bunch of heat, for example, depending on your hormonal status. I to G ratio is really important for assessing that. And you don't know how much of it is going to be stored. It all depends on hormones, which ultimately goes back to what you're actually doing in the real world, and what constituents of the food you are eating are composed of. That's going to have different effects on your hormones. That's the primary reason why I don't like the term. Not to mention that there is a question as to whether or not the food that you actually do use per unit of mass that substrate is made up of on a microscopic level is directly translated to a calorie that's actually included on a food label. There's a degree of ambiguity there as well. Is there a direct correlation 1-to-1 between the amount of calories that you actually create for body heat and the amount of mass that was used to actually create that calorie, so to speak, create the calorie, so to speak? I think that there's some ambiguity there. I'm not going to be too convicting about that, but anyway, that's why, because we're open systems and not closed systems. That's not how we work. Not to mention, once again, plus or minus 20% error around the signal there on a calorie label in the first place, because you can't measure calories. You can estimate them because you can't directly measure energy. That's why.
Should we take another question, or are we over time?
One more question. Hit the KMT button.
Okay, so while you guys are answering this question, Cool wants saying, why do you think the carnivore diet isn't pushed by the mainstream to keep us sick? There isn't enough meat for everyone. Plant-based foods being more profitable. That's several questions, actually.
Yeah, I think that all of them are probably reasons. I don't think there's one ultimate reason. Perhaps other people have different opinions. I also think that people are obsessed with this idea that human nutrition science can inform upon anything of utility whatsoever. And so they also fall into they fall into two fallacies here. Number one, they believe that lack of evidence is evidence of lack, which isn't true. Just because people haven't been studied, such as a large group of carnivore population or members, and people that are embarking upon such a dietary approach, well, then that must mean that it's not good for you. It's really unhealthy. Okay, then no, that's not true. That just means that the logic hasn't been translated into empirics, because logic and empirics are totally different. So that's the first fallacy there. But also they believe that anything that has been studied with respect to ketogenic, whatever, or increased saturated fat consumption, increased cholesterol consumption, whatever, as observed and as reported, by the way, in most cases, they believe that necessarily has implications in the carnivore diets, as if it's one thing, by the way, when it's not. It has implications in a carnivore diet's indication level as being extremely low, which is completely ridiculous. It's nonsensical. That's what I have to say about it. You can't say that human nutrition science can inform upon, first of all, a carnivore diet's effects on anything, because you can't, even if you were to study a bunch of people, because effect is really ambiguous. It's the conjugative cause for, and it's extremely difficult to inform upon causality, if possible at all, depending on the field of science you're referring to. And the idea that you can make assertions about a carnivore diet based on studies that are looking at saturated fat consumption as reported or cholesterol consumption as reported in isolation as well is even more fallacious, I think. So I think that's one of the main reasons people are obsessed with human nutrition science. They cannot get their heads out of that area of thinking. They can't do it. They can't branch out. I think that's the biggest problem.
Eddie, are you going into science and write papers and?
Well, that's the goal. That's the goal, actually. Yes.
Right.
However,
you're perfect.
I want to be a more independent. I want to be a more independent researcher than actually tied down to any mainstream institutions, though. So I'm going to try and do that in a more unorthodox way.
Well, the best way is to do what you're doing and share your thoughts and ideas. Like everything else, you monetize, and the new way is social media, in my opinion. And ultimately, I've learned more on health and wellness in the nutritional space through people's stories than ever a scientific paper. And ultimately, the stories that people share are critical in value. And I think that's a lot of what you're doing, is sharing your story of how you've improved your health on a carnivore diet. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I believe so. Yes.
Right.
100%.
Right.
Or else they wouldn't be promoting it.
Right. And so for me, the same way, the science, I think, is fascinating, but I always go right back to we're poisoned by plants and low-fat diet. We don't eat enough raw fat, by the way, because rendered fat is different than raw fat. And it's an interesting area. So simply eat the fatty meat. Eddie, where can people find your amazing content ideas?
Yeah, it's primarily on YouTube. It's just my name, Edward A. Goeke, Goeke is how you spell that. And that's primarily where I post. And then if people want to learn more about my actual story, like in depth, and also what my opinions are in more detail, they can buy my book as well, Contraindicated, which is out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, basically anywhere you can buy books, besides Google Play Books, because, you know, they're giving me issues. But hopefully, eventually.
Well, let's make sure we get a copy of that, Ollie,
Sure.
and Eddie. We need to talk more, so we need to do another live or another interview, because your stuff is remarkable, and you're a thinker, and that's what I love more than anything. I'm going to sign off from Instagram. I'll see you guys.
Bye.
And,
Eddie, we'll get you back out. We'll schedule this again. Okay,
yeah, but I'm
everybody.
going to do a little more, but I got to get. I don't know if I got to get a copy of the book. Why don't you haven't send me a signed copy?
Oh,
I'll
signed
send
copy. Yeah, I'd have to buy a copy myself and then sign it and then send it to you. You got to give me your.
Yeah, send me a copy, Ollie. Everyone should buy a copy.
I'll get it.
Put a link to the
copy.
top of this book, because we must be willing to look at opposite ideas. By the way, a real scientist always steps back and say, I haven't thought about that. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But most scientists, you know what they do?
They don't do that. They do the opposite.
They say that's wrong.
Yeah, they try and reinforce their own preconceived notions of the universe.
Right on.
Yeah.
So all I'm suggesting as a young scientist, maybe that's true.
Well, I mean, you already know that I do that if I'm on a carnivore diet. So,
but what I'm suggesting is, remember, the biochemical science was developed over 100 years ago, and we believe it, but maybe it's not true as they've taught us to believe it to be true. That's all. Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
Maybe. All right. Love you, my friend. Talk to you guys. We'll get on real soon. Anyway. Love it. Bye.
All right. That's good.
Bye.
Bye, guys.